Hey guys, we're back with our last video for this week's lesson, and this is just all review. We've actually seen all of this before, but it was last semester, so it may be kind of fuzzy, so I just want to go over it quickly. One of the things that I showed you about your homework assignment this week that you're going to need to be able to do is as you add items to the cart, this number here is going to increase next to the shopping cart. So I keep adding items and that number, let me close this so you can see it. Keep adding items and that number increases. So we're up to 3 now. And I said, as you click on cart and you go to a different page, that number 3 needs to be maintained. So the question is then, how do we remember that from one page to the next? If we use like a variable in a JavaScript, in our JavaScript in the page, we lose that as soon as we go to a different page. And so I introduced you to something last semester called session storage. And if you remember that, that means that for the life of this browser session until you close the tab, it keeps that information around if you store it in session storage. There's also something called local storage, and that'll actually keep it on your machine even after you close the browser, and it'll remember it the next time it comes up. In this particular example, we're just going to use session storage because we want it to sort of reset, and when we close the browser and start again. Of course, on a real site, you want it to be remembered. On Amazon, you want those items to still be in your cart when you come back if you've logged in. But for the sake of this project, we're gonna forget the information when the browser's closed. So I wanted to refresh your memory on session storage, and I'll send you a link to this page here that kind of walks you through the basic details. The idea is it works, very similar to a JavaScript variable. Let me switch into the console here so I can show you an example. And so if I set a variable, I would say var, my var equals maybe the number 2. All right, and so then I've got that variable that's available. My var is equal to 2. Well, if I go to a different page though, if I go here and I try to pull up my var again, it doesn't know about my var because my var wasn't set on this page. And if I go back to the page that I was on before and try my var, it's also lost because as soon as you leave that page, that variable disappears. So session storage is how you can kind of maintain that information between pages on your site. All right. And the way that you set session storage is you use this set item function call on the session storage object. So if I say session storage, and I say, whoops, and I say set item, and I name my item my var, just like I named my variable a minute ago, and I give it the value of 2, just like I did before. Now, if I call session storage dot get item, and I say I want to get the item my var, it will return the value 2. And sure enough, it does. By the way, notice even though I stored it as an integer, it stored it as a string. Okay, so that's going to be important as we're kind of trying to increment this number here. If it's going to be stored as a string, so we're going to need to convert it to an integer, and I'll refresh your memory on how to do that in just a moment. But the cool thing about this, like I said, is if I go to a different page now and I try to get that variable, that value that's in session storage, sure enough, it's still there, right? So you don't lose it when you store it in session like that. So you can kind of think about it like a variable. Really session storage is an object. And so if you remember when we work with objects, how you could set properties and values of those properties on the object, that's really what's going on here. And so if I say show me everything that's in session storage, if I just do session storage enter, you'll see that there's a property called cart count, which is what I stored in session storage that holds the value 3, and then there's the variable that we just created, the my var property that holds the value of 2. And this tells you here that there's a total of 2 items in session storage. So that's the basic way that it works. There's a couple of ways, you, in addition to using get item, you could also, the way that we would access object property values was, one of the ways is we would use, we would say open square bracket, right? And then the name, like myvar in this case, and then close square bracket. And you can access it that way as well. And you can even set it that way. If I say equals 3, right? And then I check the value in session storage, it'll say that it's equal to 3. So if I look at the whole session storage object, you see now that myvar has a value of 3, right? So there's a couple of ways to set it there. So anyway, that's going to be important. And the last thing that's going to be important to you is you're going to have to know whether or not session storage already has a value for the particular property that you're using to store this this number here. And so since I've called it cart count in this case, you can clear session storage by doing session storage .clear. All right, and once you do that, if I refresh my page here, you'll see my page goes back to 0 because that value doesn't exist anymore. I've got code that says, hey, if the page loads and that value is not there, then go ahead and create the cart count property in session storage and store a 0 in it. All right, that's just something that I've done. But if you want to check and see if the value exists, you could say if session storage, let's see, session storage. So that myvar is not there anymore. We see that it's missing from session storage right here. So if I say if session storage, I could do get item myvar, right? If it doesn't exist, then that if statement there is going to return false. So I can say if it exists, then I'll just write to the console, myvar exists. All right. Else console.log myvar does not exist. All right, and then if we run that, because myvar hasn't been created yet in session storage, it says it doesn't exist. But now if I add it to session storage, so if I do what we did before, session storage myvar equals 3, and now I run that same if statement, myvar exists. And sure enough, it does. If we actually look at the entire session storage object, we see that it's there. Okay. To remove an item from session storage, an individual item, instead of clearing the whole thing, you would do session storage dot remove item, and then give it the name of the item that you want to remove. So if we want to remove myvar, we could run that. And now if we check session storage, sure enough, myvar is no longer in session storage. All right, so session storage is how you can maintain values across pages. All right, so that's useful. The other thing that's going to be useful for this idea of being able to add items to the shopping cart is you're going to have to take the number that's there and you're going to have to increment it by 1. And so since we saw that the value in session storage is stored as a string, even if we define it as an integer, it's still stored as a string, we're going to have to convert that to an integer. And the way that we do that is using the parseInt function. And so we've used that before. There's a page here on W3 Schools that I'll send you a link to where you can play around with that. But basically, if you pass in a valid, a string that is a valid number, so 23, and you run parseInt on it, it returns the actual number, the integer value of that. Now in this case here, since you're setting up that session storage value and you're always updating it, you can kind of be sure that it's always going to be a valid integer. Remember, if you passed in something that was invalid, you'd get that not a number returned. But in this case, we're not going to really have to worry about that because we're setting that value up in session storage. So we don't have to worry about it getting changed by something else. So we can kind of assume that it's always an integer. And so what that means is that if you have, for example, in session storage, if we set, we'll use the other way that I showed you, if we do set item myvar to 2, right? We'll do that one. So that now in session storage, you have this value myvar. So let's check it, check session storage and make sure it's there. Sure enough, it is. It's set to the string 2. I can convert that to an integer by doing parseInt and then getting that value from session storage. Session storage, I won't copy this whole thing here. We'll change it to get item instead of get item. So parseInt, and that will return the integer 2. And so now if I want to increment it by 1, I could do parseInt plus 1 equals 3. And if I want to set the myvar value in session storage to the new version of that, see if I look at it right now, it's still set, myvar is still set 2. So if I want to set myvar to whatever the current value is incremented by 1, then I could do session storage. Let's see, we'll use this way to access the variable this time. Myvar equals, I'll copy all of this here. And just for kicks, since we're kind of going back and forth, I'll access the variable the same way. Instead of using get item, this time I'll access the variable doing that. So for whatever's in session storage myvar, convert it to an integer, add 1 to it, and then store it back in session storage myvar. Okay, so I run that. It sets it to 3. So now if I check session storage, sure enough, myvar is set back to 3. All right. So hopefully that's simple enough. Hopefully that'll come back to you. You can definitely reread that on W3 Schools if the session storage stuff is a little bit fuzzy. The last thing that I want to show you is I want to remind you about the confirm statement. So alert and confirm, we use those a lot at the beginning of the year. And remember, alert just pops up a little box. Hello. Right, so it'll just pop it up and you got a little OK button. That's the extent of the interaction, but there's something else called confirm. And confirm, you can ask a question. You can say, how are you? Right? And so if I call confirm, it pops up the box and it gives you an OK and a cancel. And so if I click OK, this confirm statement is going to return true. If I click cancel, it's going to return false. So let's just test that. If I click OK, sure enough, true comes back. If I do it and click cancel, then it returns false. And so I could say something like, I could say confirm, do you want to continue? I could ask a question like that, and I could say if, when I call confirm, do you want to continue, if it's true, then I'll alert and say thanks for staying with us, right? Otherwise, that will mean that they chose cancel instead, and I'll say alert, see you later. All right. All right, so I run that, and do you want to continue? And I say, no, I'm not interested, cancel. Okay, then it says see you later, right? Then if I run it again, and this time I click OK, do you want to continue? Sure. Thanks for staying with us. So it runs this piece of code down here, right? So that's the way the confirm statement works. And that's basically what's going on here when I'm adding items to the cart, right? I'm saying, I'm displaying this confirm statement that says, are you sure you want to add this particular snowboard at a cost of $200 to the cart? And if I click OK, then it increments it by 1. If I try to add 1 and I click cancel instead, see, now it's at 2. If I click cancel, it stays at 2. It doesn't actually add it to the cart. So confirm statement is going to be the key to doing that. What about how do you know the name of the snowboard and the value of the snowboard? All right, I'm not going to elaborate on this much, but if you inspect this add to cart button here, all right, you'll see right here, here's the button. I've added to each of these buttons a title attribute that matches the name of the snowboard, and also a cost attribute that matches the name, matches the dollar amount, the cost of the snowboard. All right. So we've already gone over how you access the attributes of a particular item. One thing that you've known, you know from previous homework that we've done, you know how to define the click event, and how to run a particular run code on the click event of a particular element on the page. And so you can actually define the click event for every button on this page, because every button on this page has a class, has the class add button. So you could say for every class add button, for every element that matches that, when anybody clicks that, I want to run the function, I want to run a function that does the following. In this case, let's just say when they click that, I'm going to alert and say, hi. So if I run that code right there, then anytime I click one of these buttons, whoops, hi, there it is, hi pops up. I've got some more code that's running here. So it runs my other code first, and then it runs this one. So it is indeed doing that, right? And so that's the idea behind how you would, it's in some code like this that you would access the, down here, sorry, the title and the cost attribute, and concatenate a string together so that you can present that confirm message to them and determine whether or not they want to actually add it to the cart. All right, so that's it. That's really everything for this week. It's just a matter of tackling that homework and getting the next portion of your project completed. So as always, you guys let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.